Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 153.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
You guys work out who's going to answer the next question and get some information for you. How many of you are CWNEs now? Look at that. Love it. Now, lower your hands. How many of you want to be a CWNE? There's your audience, guys. We're talking to you to help you along your path. Every one of these within the last couple months at the most, I think, has been through the same path you're going to want to go on, that you're in. So Brian's our latest as of today. He's the latest CWNE. So first topic for the CWNEs up here, and go ahead and pass it down as you answer. What did you do to prepare for your journey? Not what was your journey, how did you get ready? What was your motivation?
I think for me, the biggest motivation is I work for a medical device company. And being a former medic in the military, when you're always trying to be prepared and always trying to be ready for all situations. And what I was seeing when I first started, there was a lot of unreadiness. So for me, my real motivation, to be honest, was the patients at the other end of our devices. And I wanted to ensure that we could work with the hospitals as best as we could to provide, the best solution to monitor the patients. Or not monitor patients on Wi-Fi in some cases, depending on what the environment is. So for me, the real motivation was the patients at the end of our devices and ensuring they were safe.
My motivation...
Be truthful now.
I'm going to. Was when Keith looked at me at Echo How Training and said, "You're not a CWNE." That was kind of the kick in the pants, like, I should really do this and finish this. And I've been... because Sam's been driving me for a couple of years since I got my IE wireless. Yeah, crack the whip on it and call him the help desk. But, he's CWNE. And I think for me, it's the when I started in wireless at the U back in 99, I'm like, this is really cool. There's not too much out there for certifications. And then I saw the CWNP program and I was interested in it, but never really went down that route because I went to a Cisco partner, so I focused heavily on the Cisco certifications. But it was always that, okay, I want to do this. I want to be able to get that experience first to be able to do it. So then I finally felt that I was ready and prepared and had the experience that I needed to honestly be able to put my application in. But Keith's kick in the pants definitely did help a lot at the end of last year.
I totally thought you were already a CWNE, really. So,
for me, it was about connecting dots. I ran wireless and a decent-sized wireless infrastructure at a higher ed for years, and I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought it was successful, but every time I wanted to question it, I felt like I didn't really have the background to do so. Whether that's questioning RRM's decisions or what is DBM versus DB. I mean, once I started reading into it, the more I learned, the more I realized that I didn't really know what I was doing before I started learning. So for me, it was about connecting dots and having the ability to feel confident in my design decisions, and that's about it.
Thanks.
I think for me, there was a couple of things that came up. First of all, the bunch of people who I know really well that I regard as very good friends, like Blake and Sam, who went out and got theirs, and I was thinking, I really should get this done. But then I think the biggest kick in the pants, like Blake, was Devin Aiken said to me, "What, you haven't got it yet? I thought you had it." I'm like, maybe I should do something about that. So there's a combination of factors with that as well. The other main driver that I had for getting that too is I'm the head of the wireless practice at Accuvant, and I wanted to lead by example, to be able to encourage my team to aim for the same goals as well. So I thought I really had to get it in order to expect them to get it.
Good, thanks. Again, how many people are bloggers out there? Okay, for those of you who are bloggers, you have your hands up. Have you ever had this experience? You're researching something and you go, oh, I have this really cool idea. I'm gonna go find out if there's any more information. And you Google on the internet and you get taken to your own blog. All the time. There's value in having your blog for yourself, for your own internal remembrance. Google's like my memory now. And if I have a little inkling of something, it's probably because I actually wrote it, but I just don't remember it. So I find that happening. So the next question, and you just go back in order, do you have a blog? And what blogs do you use in helping you prepare for your CWNE?
Yeah, so I have a blog, wifikiwi.com, that I run. And like Keith, I've had several experiences when I've been studying and I've come back to an old blog article that I wrote. I think as far as the other ones, Andrew's blog at Revolution Wi-Fi, I've used that quite heavily. Keith's as well. Just general Google hits Sam's quite a few times. That's about the main ones for me.
Yeah, me too. The fifth CWNP book, revolutionwifi.net. Plug for Andrew there. That's a great one. Mine is mikealbano.com. Like he said, it's really like my own version of Wiki, right? When I have an idea and I want to write it down because I know I'm going to forget it in 6 months, it's a great reference. It also forces you to learn the subject really well because you're going to write about it and then people are going to read it and they call you an idiot if you do it wrong. So, so it's a good opportunity to sort of check yourself, make sure you understand it before you write it down for the world to see. And sometimes you're still wrong, and that's okay too.
Yeah, the last 3 exams, I did it in a fashion I would never recommend anybody to do. I ran the gauntlet on it in 3 months, so I didn't really have a ton of time that I went back and looked at a lot of the blogs. It was more me not sleeping, or if I did, go to sleep at 2 a.m. after reading the books and reading through my notes and things. But I mean, I've always found information on Sam's blog because it's a good way to get you some different perspective on things as to what I would necessarily not agree with. But like others have said, Andrew's got a great blog for a lot of information. Even though some of the posts are kind of a little dated, there's still good information in there. Stefanik has got a great blog for information, and I'm not even going to try to say his name because I'll butcher it, but Mr. NCCIEW on Twitter has got an awesome blog too. He did a great job with the CWAP book that I would highly recommend anybody that's trying to go through the CWAP to look at his blog because he definitely puts it into perspective that is easy to understand.
Yeah, I think for me, being at the end of the line, it's pretty much all the same. Definitely Andrew's, Mr. N, CCIEW was definitely a big one. Sam's, some of the vendor blogs, so Ekahau, Aruba went on some of those sites as well, Cisco, Arrowhive. There's just a lot of great information out there that's free, and it's just a matter of taking the time, picking a topic, and going forth and researching it.
Okay, great. If you're on a journey, start your own blog. Just I do it. Whether or not anyone reads it, it doesn't really matter. It's more for you. But once you've done it, other people are going to read it, and you'll help your neighbors. So it's really a community growth thing. Everyone who writes a blog, I don't know anyone who writes a blog to get famous or make money. That's not what happens. But what it does is it helps you internally, and I'll let you get started. And how much does it cost to run a blog, Blake?
The easiest solution is just to use Evernote, which is free, and Pistachio, because you can just write an Evernote note, and as you're writing that note, you're like, hey, this would make a great blog post, and tag it, and it's going to be posted as a blog.
And what does it cost?
Nothing.
Nothing. Just
time.
Do it. Okay, next question for all of you, and you can spend as much time as you want. Tell us about your home lab.
So my home lab, in the office, started out with our medical devices, just kind of testing, and we had a Cisco infrastructure. Started reading DP and realized I needed a lot of work on the wired side. So my home lab ended up turning into CCNA lab in my house. Also based off of last year and working with some of the great vendors out there, I was able to get additional stuff. So I've worked with some of the Arrowhive stuff, played with mesh networking in the lab to kind of understand how that works and, get some experience with that I wouldn't normally get an opportunity to work with. And working with some of the Cisco stuff, the RRM, all of the stuff on how that works. Again, trying to understand what the hospital IT folks have to go through and how it could have either positive or negative effects on what we do. So for me, mostly Cisco, some Arrowhive in there. And those were the main things I focused on.
And before we pass it on, Brian, you're kind of in a unique situation. You work for a company that has equipment. What would you recommend for someone who doesn't, just starting out, they don't have anyone to give them Cisco gear? What's kind of the minimum you'd put in your lab to start with?
For me, what I did is I went back and looked at what our installs were, and it was 93% Cisco. So that ended up being my main focus. So for me, minimally, I had a 2504 and 2 APs that I started out with, just to get going. If you're doing CWAP, I capture everything. No matter what you're doing, just turn your analyzer on. If you're watching TV, you're streaming something, capture it. See what that behavior looks like and get used to it, because every time you turn a Wi-Fi device on, you have an opportunity to learn something for sure. So for me, the minimal stuff was I had a 2504 and a couple APs that I started playing with. And I know there's a great deal out there for a bundle on that right now.
Very good deal. So some of you have probably seen my lab from my blog post, but I've got a ladder rack set up in my office so I can do AP mountings to a standard drop ceiling grid across it, and I've got pretty much every access point that I can. And I've been very, very lucky in some of the relationships that I've created with the vendors out there, like Cisco and Sean from Aruba. You've helped me out a lot on gear to be able to start my Aruba training, and I appreciate it. And I think at the end of the day, you just need to have an access point. I mean, if you really want to get started in this, a Linksys AP is still talking RF. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy a $1,000 access point. Are you going to have more advanced features and be able to do more cool stuff with a better quality AP? Yeah. But how many times do you guys run into the cheap crap in the field? It's just what happens. So I think if you want it, start with what you can afford and make that way. But I've got the Cisco gear, I've got Meraki gear that runs the house, I've got ICE deployed out there, and MDM was definitely a key for me so that as I travel, if I screw up something, I can switch my wife's phone over to something that works remotely. SLA is high on that one and requirements are high, but I think it's important just to be able to have something. Just get yourself something, get yourself some 8494 adapters. They pop up on eBay. Sam should have a session on how to find good deals on eBay, because he finds some things I'm just like, how did you find that, man? That's awesome. But browse Craigslist. You never know what you're going to find out there. Aruba does a great mobility, what is the exact term? Mobility hero contest on the forums that you can get some gear on just by making posts and getting kudos. And that's another avenue. If you don't want to do a blog, you can get out there and then you can get some gear and get your hardware that you need. Yeah, Sam, thanks for the little prod there. We just got doing the next Wi-Fi Rockstar contest, which started because Fluke gave me a Lynx printer as a thank you for talking with their developer about what they should do for next versions of it. And I'm like, you know what? I want to give back, because I'm getting people that are giving me stuff, and I want to give back to the people that listen to our show and make our show worthwhile doing, because it does take a lot of time to do some of the episodes. So I think, just get yourself involved in the community, and you'll be able to find ways to get the hardware or create relationships with people, because you never know when we're rotating our labs. Just because we're rotating out older gear doesn't mean it's not still applicable. How old is the CCIW still on hardware? You can still get all that hardware easily on eBay, and but just, go out there and find the gear and do as little or as much as you want to. Just have something. It's important to have a lab and always be working in it, because you should never stop learning. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, I think that pretty much well sums it up. What he said. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to have a lot of test equipment in my previous role at work. So I had pretty much every AP Cisco made for the past 10 years. At home, I have some Cisco and Aruba APs, and you don't need a lot to learn. A Raspberry Pi with free Radius will teach you a lot about Radius. I'm sure all your significant others can't wait to be running WPA2 in Enterprise in the home. My sample clients are, my kids and my wife, and they love me for it. But yeah, you just got to get your hands on it, and it doesn't need to be expensive stuff. Cheap stuff, and just keep trying. Just try to configure it on your own, and you'll end up learning.
I think my lab is probably a little bit different from most people. I used to have a lot of the gear that I have at home. Then I decided that the power bill was too much, so I actually went and set it up in a lab at work and got remote access to it instead to get to most of the gear. I have Aruba gear, I have Cisco gear, I have Aerohive gear in the lab, along with a bunch of switches and other stuff to practice on as well. Most of the gear that I've gotten has either been given to me by vendors that I've had associations with, or that I've gotten through my work itself. For my home lab, however, I've just finished rebuilding it. I decided that I wanted to actually build a VMware environment that I could set up a lot of the back-end stuff that you would use for 802.1x, like a PKI, Radius server, running things like ClearPass in it. So I wanted to have a very nice VMware environment to put all of that on. So I set up 2 servers, which basically went out, sourced the pass on the internet, used the new Avaton chip that's from Intel on a Supermicro board, and they ended up not even costing me about $1,000 to put the servers together. So I've got that VMware environment running at home with remote access to it as well. I think in terms of acquiring gear itself, I agree with what these guys are saying. Form relationships with people, especially relationships with the various vendors out there. They're usually very helpful in trying to get you to learn, and other people in the community as well, though. They're more than welcome to help you use the gear, especially if it's somebody who's just got it sitting around at home and they're not using it themselves.
Would there be a need for like a lending library? Because I know I have probably not as much as Blake's got, but racks of APs that once you've practiced with them, you learned on them, and they might be a seasons old. I'm not going to use them again in my personal learning, but they might be valuable for someone else. Would there be a need for a lending library? Okay, the only guys clapping are the guys who already have gear. So so really what they're saying is they want to get rid of some gear. Our wives and significant others probably would like that if we could get rid of some stuff. Kind of a change of topic here. We'll come back to the tech in a minute. But you just finished the CWNE. It was obviously a lot of study time, a lot of planning. What's next? Where are you going to go from here?
For me, I'm actually looking forward to being able to start writing blog articles again. I've had several in kind of the pipeline that got put aside as part of my focusing on getting the CWNE out of the way last year in 2014. So I haven't been writing a lot of blog articles lately. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to that. On the certification front, I also want to get the Aruba certification for ClearPass, ACCP.
I recently took on a new role. Time is not a lot. I don't have a lot of it right now, but I imagine that CCIE wireless or so.
I'm trying to get back to a normal sleeping schedule and not be a zombie, but I think for me next, after take a couple months off and get myself back straight, and then I'll do ACMX or ACDX and start going down that path, because you should never stop learning.
And for me, what makes sense is start to go down the Cisco path, based on the fact that's what we run into the majority of the time out there with our installs in hospitals.
I made an assumption when I asked the question that they all answered gratefully. They didn't say nothing other than Blake. He's going to just take some time off.
Tools review.
In this next section, we were talking about the WLAN Pros notebook, the one we put together for WLPC in Phoenix in February. And this first one, the little one, is just about the first laminated page. It was designed to do a couple things. One, it has a map on the front of the U.S. with time zones, so you can see, basically what the different time zones are. As accurate as we could get at the time when we were building it. If you have some feedback about your specific state or area that has a different time zone, we'll adjust accordingly. There's also both the inch, imperial, and a metric ruler on that, and these are designed to go so you have them with you. You never know. You just need to take a little ruler measurement. Since then, we've looked at adding in the next versions, instead of just having a ruler for on the top and bottom, we're going to go with a architectural scale. If you haven't looked or used an architectural scale, it allows you to take a floor plan that has a specific scale and then use the scale to measure on the floor plan in either feet or meters, and the ratios are already worked out for you. So in the next version of this, we're going to add a architectural scale on both the top and bottom for imperial and metric. So you can use it instead of just to measure things, you can use it to measure floor plans. On the back side of this page is a world map, both with time zones, and we tried to get as much detail as we could on here. It's a little small for those of you like me, have old and have to wear bifocals. I have to kind of get in really close. WLAN pros, we travel around quite a lot, and it's kind of nice to be able to see where things are in the world. I think in our next version of this, we're also going to add something with international plug types. So depending on when you're going, you can quickly look here and see what the type of plug you'll need depending on the country you're going to. So that's just a quick review of one of the pieces, the first page that's in the Wireless LAN Pros notebook.
10 Talks.
For those of you who don't know me, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I promised, a while ago that I would not put people through presentations that I don't like. And keeping in mind that this is a presentation from wireless professionals to wireless professionals, we make the content. So I made a vow years and years ago not to put people through presentations you cannot read from the back. So we're not going to see much writing. Ferney Muñoz, I'm originally from Colombia. I've been for about 16, almost 17 years in the US. I've been working with technology for about 25, 27 years, and probably the last 20 of them just fully doing IT work. The last few years doing wireless, and I had the pleasure to meet Mr. Keith Parsons. I work for a school district in Utah, in Salt Lake City. No, the district did not pay for any of this. Just a long story on that. But it's exciting to be at these conferences. And for those of you here or out there that say like, I will just watch the videos later. The presentations, I don't know, it's 30, 40% of what you learn and when you share here. If you come to the conference, you'll have the opportunity to have lunch with book authors, like Dave Coleman in the house, and then you have CWNE's left and right, you have Kit Parsons, you have Scott, you have all these people that you can share with, and that time that you spend with them outside of this, that sometimes where you learn the most, and you get those opportunities. CWNA number, actually they don't have numbers, nobody cares about a CWNA, just like, no, CWNEs, those are the only ones we give numbers to, but it's the first step. And if you're not certified, get certified. If you're working towards your next certification, do it. Took me only like 4 years to get my CWNA. Yeah, that sounds like pretty bad. But, raising kids and having a family, a full-time job and side jobs and all that, it takes time. And it's difficult to make time to study, but there is always an excuse to not study and not get certified. So go ahead and do it. I do have a blog with one posting, but I have a blog. It's the wi5things.com. Hopefully I'll start posting more, but again, it's the same excuse that, I have kids and I have a family and a job and all this. So through all this process of getting to know wireless and get started, I decided to volunteer myself towards, do some testing. So one of those was the RF measurement tools. These are the what I use. I'm not here to tell you how RF attenuates and how it works. That's Miko and all these guys that know in depth the details. But I'm just going to share with you a testing I did. And I know as you look to the list, there's like, computer, tape measure, masking tape, table. It sounds like I'm going to tape somebody to a table and torture him, but it's not about that. I'll show you in detail kind of like what I did. Time is there. It's not a tool or a device. It's more of a resource that we just have to make everything work around that. So I started testings and I started growing frustrated, and I called the master and I have one of the minions. Well, he actually works with us at the district now. helping me, set up things. And then I'm frustrated, and I call the master, and he's like, Mr. Parsons, I'm doing the testing, but it's not working. He's like, what do you mean it's not working? He's like, yeah, I'm standing right here in the same place. I'm not moving, and it's all over the place. Neck 21, 25, 22, 26, 21, 25. It's broken. Something's wrong. He's like, yeah, that's normal. I'm like, but how can that be normal? And he explained last night, how our second test that we had for the stress test couldn't be done because it was just hard to measure one thing and get exact same results just a second later. So I decided to just move on to, okay, because it's true, if you're holding a link spring, an air check in your hands, and you're just certain distance from your AP, and you breathe, and you move, and you switch hands because you're tired, it's different. And just short distances will make a huge difference when you're testing. And John, in your presentation, he explained he had to measure things like 10 times and just get an average because there's just no way around it. If you think that if somebody makes a test and you're going to use that data and be good, it's not going to be accurate because it changes all the time. And whatever test you're doing is going to be different from one that was done a minute before. So that's why I encourage you to do some of these. Some of these look simple. This is just simple. It just takes time and some gear. And yes, you have Twitter. You can just get online and ask questions. But do your own test and kind of get an idea. That's why you have to know your losses, kind of see what you're up against. If you're doing some measurements with an AP on a stick, then yeah, you have to measure the distance from where you are to where it is the height. And then if you move away, that distance. And then, of course, it's really easy to make a mistake because if the AP is 2 meters up high and you are 2 meters out here, then you're not 2 meters from the AP. You get the hypotenuse and then you do a square root of the square of the side, of the sum of the square of the sides. And then you're actually almost 3 meters from the AP, not 2. And as I'll show you with some graphs, any little distance matters. So using tables and the tape, just having exact distances. Of course, the table has certain length, and then you just figure out your environment, wherever you are. The tables work for me because when you're holding it, it changes. When you leave it on the table, then you can just look at it, get an average, because that thing is not going to sit in one place still. It just moves, goes up and down. That's normal. I learned the hard way. What you really need for a test like this, and that's how you would measure walls as well, is just an RF source and a source of power for the RF source, because I believe an AP with no power is not considered an RF source. It's just an AP. I used a switch, and I used a PoE switch, and some of the guys that do AP on a stick, they carry a battery, and they have wheels, and they have a strap, a backpack. There are many ways. In the environment it was okay. We tend to use a little one, a pocket size AP, and then there are some USB power sources that you can fit both, in any little space. A device to measure, there's a big controversy. You call it RSSI, or you call it dBm, or power level, or dBm level. There's not a defined metric for RSSI against something. It's not like a value, and depending on the devices you're using, if your computer says the signal level is 50%, it's 50% of what? If you are measuring with certain devices that are special for that, they'll give you more accurate readings. So let's get to some data. I started outdoors, no walls, no nothing. And it kind of looks pretty straight, but it's not accurate because I was interested in that first meter. And as you can see, these values, they're not equally distributed because these are just 20 centimeters from the AP and 40 and 60 and then 1 meter. So what I did is I broke it into pieces. So that is just making 1 to 10 meters in 1 meter increments. And then, it kind of follows what we're familiar with, but some people, they have this beautiful curve, just perfect. It's not like that. of the many tests in many different places that we did, we could never find that perfect, beautiful shaped curve. So that's why these testings will tell us accurate readings. This is what happens in the first meter. So that's why if you're testing, that's why they recommend, the experts recommend just put things at least a meter apart. If you have two things right next to each other, and then you have, for one, it's data, but it's probably not going to be real world. It's not going to be very accurate. This is just out of whack. Numbers are all over the place. You have to average. When I presented this, Mr. Parsons was like, what's that little bump there? It's just like, well, that's what I read at that specific time in that specific environment where I was. And that is indoors, and you have multipath. So what you're reading is signals coming from the floor, from up, from the side, from everywhere. So that's going to give you averages that just measure differently. This would be the one with an AP 1.2 meters from a wall. So kind of the same thing as the other one. I had all these measurements and I broke them into pieces. The interesting thing is that the curve kind of follows the same shape regardless of where you are. If you're indoors, if you're outdoors, if you have an AP, near the wall or far away from the wall. But pay attention to this one here. You cannot see, okay, I broke my promise of not presenting this type of things you cannot read, but you'll have the presentation, and basically what it has is you have the AP that is less than 1 meter from the wall. So you're on the wall, you put the AP here. Then you measure with it, right there. And then you go to the other side of the wall. So we are, unless you have like a really, really thick wall, you are within a meter of your AP. So if you put your AP there and go right to the other side, right on the other side of the wall, we're at NEC 22. So we have that huge loss. And it's like, are you sure this wall is 9 dBs or 12 dBs or whatever you get in your specific environment? And it's not really accurate, because even in free space, that first meter, you lose 15, 20 dBs. So what you have to do is just put it away from the wall and just measure multiple times, and then go to the other side of the wall. You'll see, like in this one, you have the AP about 5 meters from the wall. Then you start measuring from the AP. Let's say it's in that table, and you start measuring. And then you measure right before the wall, and then right on the other side of the wall. It kind of goes, it's consistent, because next to the wall with the AP in the same room, I got about 34, and then right on the other side, and again, try to keep those lines straight, because if you have the AP here, and then you walk around the side, and then you end up on this side, you're not 4 meters from the wall anymore, you're more than that. So that gave me about 3 dB loss in that case. So that will tell me that wall is 3 dB loss. Of course, the experts, these guys have spent thousands of hours, and as I was doing this, I'm like, I appreciate bloggers and all these people that spend hours and hours and hours doing all this testing. It takes time. Something as simple as this, I don't know how many hours I spent, but that's what it takes. And all of this data will help us. And yes, even in long distance, because I said, oh, I'm already here, let's just measure 4 meters more. Yeah, it kind of goes there. But this first meter is what you have to watch out for. So in summary, tools and devices in the environment, they will vary. Just make sure, because as we said last night, it is highly volatile, so you'll get different measures and everything, and you cannot calibrate. You test 2 cars of the same vendor, and they're going to give you different measurements. So I think I'm out of time a while ago.
Thanks, Ferney. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.